Good afternoon. My talk is going to be yet a little different. I want to give you a little bit quick background about myself with respect to funding and the perspective I'm bringing to funding. 25 years ago, I was asked to start an organization with another person, Doug Lapp, and there was just two of us, and we were given about a year to execute a proof of concept. And the U.S. National Academy of Sciences actually borrowed me from my previous job, and at some point gave me the opportunity to make a decision to either stay or not stay. So I resigned a good job in Fairfax County Public Schools. I was pregnant with my third child. I'd never raised any money. I think I'm somewhat entrepreneurial. But when we were asked to start, we were told that we had a mission to transform both science and mathematics in the United States and throughout the world, and we didn't know quite what that meant. So I'm going to share some things that I've learned about raising money, both as an organization that functions on all soft money. I have 22 staff, 50 consultants, and about 400 people in the United States that work for us on a voluntary basis to help execute programs for us that are scientists and engineers and superintendents. There are faculties for our services. On the average, we've been raising anywhere between $3 to $5 million. So since 1985, I figured now we've raised about $75 million. I get no money from the government, and the only money we get from the Smithsonian Institution is space for where we are and my salary. That's it. And telephones. So I want to share with you that for us it means that we need to raise money to catalyze. So our role is what was described earlier by Brazil. We don't implement programs. Our role is to provide leadership development services to school districts and state leaders and teach them about research and best practices, how to operationalize those, put them into excellent programs, and then to benchmark that over time. Does that make sense? Okay. So I've organized my talk about 4 areas. What are some of the assumptions and models that I've learned over the last 2.5 decades? What knowledge and skills do you need to raise money? And the principles of support. What do you need to have in place to be entrepreneurial and to be effective in fundraising? And why do you need diverse funding sources, and how do they change over time depending upon what you're putting in place? So I'm going to talk a little bit about social norms. When I started in 1985, I didn't look at the problem this way, but I do now. The transformation of science education is a social norms problem. It is like taking a nation from smoking to non-smoking. In the United States, that has taken probably 30 years. It's pushing 2 generations, and it's actually secondhand smoke. And the effects on people is what drove it. But it's a complex health problem that required policy changes, education changes, all the same things that are necessary to transform science education. So if you look at that, we have been working for 25 years to change the social norms, to change the values about teaching and learning. And when we started in 1985, less than 1% of the elementary schools, secondary schools valued inquiry-based science education. They taught using a textbook, very traditional methodology, or no science at all. Today, we're at 30% of the U.S. student population and the districts they represent that value a whole different way of teaching and learning. They may not all be doing it well, but they are not smoking. They believe, totally believe, they will not go back to a traditional book. They believe in research-based instructional materials. They believe in lifelong learning. They believe in professional learning communities. That's not true at secondary. We believe we're about somewhere about 5%. So what that means, and this is a message I'd like to leave you with, when you introduce an intervention or an innovation into a system, which is what we did 25 years ago, it is seen just as that, as an innovation. It is seen as something unique and unusual. And state departments of education are not interested in innovation. They're interested in something that's ubiquitous, that's something they can take to scale, that has evidence it works. So in the beginning, we learned pretty darn quickly that if you wanted support for this, it had to come from the private sector, not the public sector. Very difficult money to raise, but that changes over time the closer you get to the new social norm. As you move closer towards me, the funding structure should change from being the majority private to the majority public. And what is good about that is private money follows public money. You can use public money to leverage private money far easier. For example, Shell Oil is one of our major supporters. Shell would put much more money on the table to help us if we had more federal money in hand rather than just us using their money alone. They are looking for leverage. So here's another assumption that we have learned, I think, more than 2 years out.